Welcome to the Redhead Reveal podcast. I am Jenn Pinkerton, your Redhead host, a psychotherapist, high-performance coach, writer, speaker, and the private practice owner of Pinkerton Psychotherapy. I help people reveal their connectedness within their relationships and sexuality, understanding root causes of beliefs and behaviors that hold them back from success, and prevent them from having a relationship where they thrive. I assist them in returning into the person they are born to be before they were limited by trauma, societal or social concerns, or attachment wounds. Today we're going to talk about everybody's favorite topic, sex. We're actually going to talk about how it relates to what we dove into a little bit in our last episode about attachment theory and attachment in relationships. And if you missed the last episode, we discussed how our attachment styles and our primary love lessons, basically, those are the lessons that we were given as children from our caregivers or parents that form this level of attachment. And it presents this way and shows up in our romantic relationships. And we're going to understand that root cause. That foundation can really help us figure out the way we function in relationships. So in this episode, we're taking that a step further and talking about what that looks like in sex. In a loving relationship, if we have a strong connection and we're having great sex, it's only going to further the bond, and it's only going to strengthen that bond we have with our partner. John Bowlby was the founder of attachment theory, and he talked about this emotional development. He talked about how what we did get or didn't get, and he didn't really talk about how it relates to sex, but I see this influencing sex in so many ways. It is intertwined, and there's a correlation between how we define what love is and how we're going to show up when we're in a vulnerable capacity. If we had unmet needs, or we existed in an environment that was riddled with addiction, or lack of emotional attunement, or even intrusiveness, or some other form of trauma, it's going to manifest for us in this way, and it's going to affect the sense of worthiness that was originally established. If you had that secure attachment and that stability, then you're probably going to be propelled to understand what this intimate connection with your romantic partner is and be able to nurture it and be able to feel connected. But if you had a primary attachment figure that wasn't responsive, then we might have that sense of insecurity. We must have felt as a child, and we illustrate that in a sexual experience as well. You might feel a sense of deactivation, or that you might feel like you don't trust that relationship at all. Those abandonment fears are going to fuel that, and you're going to have a further reaction to this almost a protest response if you're trying to get that attention from your partner. This is where flight and fight responses also fit in, because your entire romantic strategy is then affected, and it's dependent or interdependent how you are in a relationship. Those styles were formed just so very early, and they stick with us for so very long, and it affects how we perceive ourselves, how we're going to build our bonds and connections, and what we're going to look like when we're in love. It's going to predict our entire approach of things. And I see this displayed in the bedroom often, again and again, really, with different clients. Most people know you can separate love and sex, and you don't have to have that sense of connection to enjoy sex. You can't just have a physical aspect, and that's designed basically for pleasure. And when that occurs, sometimes novelty or more explorative aspects of sex are there with a higher level of sexual stimulus. But that's hard to sustain when it's just that, when there's not a connection. You might lead to issues with maybe infidelity or resentment because there's such a gap or distance between the two partners. There's these other type of behaviors that come into play as well when you try to establish a connection elsewhere. There's a different type of sex is viewed as this solid sex, where basically you have so much caring or anxiousness about your partner, you can't talk about your emotional needs, and you're not getting any sort of comfort. So sex is an attempt to fill that void. It's kind of like searching for connection but never really finding it. Then there's other sex, which is probably what everyone thinks might just be basic sex. It's secure attachment, means there's vulnerability, means you don't have fear of rejection, means you don't have fear of talking about what you need or what you want. You can play, you can ask for this, you can ask for that. You can have this heightened sense of interaction from it. Novelty really isn't needed as a form of distraction, but it can be present for fun. But there's not a sense of anxiousness or this uncertain feeling. And because of that, your engagement level sexually is going to be heightened, and you're going to have this intensified sense of freedom. It is biological that we're going to have a strong sexual connection and release oxytocin from our body. That gives us a sense of trust and security, and we have some level of safety with our partner to feel accepted, and it feels better. So having that secure attachment in sex encourages this confident approach and ease with intimacy, and allows that freedom to engage in sex in this way to express love. Whereas someone might actually, on the little more insecure, avoidant side, wouldn't go that way. So if all this is going to create a more pleasurable experience by understanding who you are, due to that sense of emotional safety you might be seeking. In contrast for that, you might be more sexually impaired in a functional way if you're chronically insecure about being loved, or if you have a total lack of worthiness and low self-esteem. You might present in a very different way. Fear of rejection might motivate you, and you might actually use sex just to have a sense of meaning. Those same needs that never got met when you're younger could actually be triggered. The fear of losing your partner or not having a partner at all might motivate this sense of abandonment of your own needs and wishes just for the other person. And sometimes that can look like somebody who is performative in sex. They perform just to make that other person have an amazing experience with zero regards to their own needs. And then there might be an avoidant type that's a total lack of closeness. You might strip all the intimate nature from sex. It could be self-serving and almost cold and definitely more opportunistic. Maybe there's no strings attached. So there's a lot of different things. Also, there's solitary sex with masturbation that eliminate all feelings if that's all you rely on. There's a deprivation for warmth and comfort, and there's no intimate connection. So as I've touched on all these different kinds, and maybe one of them resonates with you, so you can understand how it might show up for you when you're dating and having sex with someone. Secure attachment is the one we all want. It's the Holy Grail. We're looking for someone who's got this comfort with displaying affection and interest, and they feel good about being alone and being with others, and they're good with being independent. They honor their own boundaries. They're going to prioritize a relationship with you in a way that provides comfort and love and connection. And they're going to understand who they are. They're not going to use sex just to fill a need or to be figuring things out. They're going to look at things differently and be able to handle rejection. They're going to be able to handle trust. It's not going to be this sense of crazy jealousy. They're going to be loyal, and they're going to prioritize the relationship in a healthy way. Contrary to what you might think, according to research, most of our population is actually secure attachment. But you may think, I've never met that. But a lot of people don't ever get their needs met, and they don't have that sense of emotional attunement or validation of being seen and heard growing up. If you don't have this predictability in life with your caregivers and it isn't sufficient, it will truly affect you. That anxious type might be nervous and stressed about the relationship. They need a lot of reassurance. They tell you lots of times, how they feel, and they're looking to get that back from you. They want that affection and interaction and display of romance. Being alone to them is probably quite terrifying, as well as even being single. So they might succumb or connect to an unhealthy or toxic relationship. Maybe even staying one that's quite abusive longer than they should. Maybe just because they have an inability to trust someone. And if they're scared they let this go, they may not have another opportunity. Sometimes this behavior can almost look irrational or extremely emotional, and you get suspicious, almost paranoid. Now, when you get to the more of avoidant type, also that's a whole different deal. That's basically this extreme sense of independence, but not as comfortable with intimacy, more like commitment phobic. More like rationalizing or reasoning out of every intimate situation that could have ever been in. If you profess feelings, they're going to be running away. They're going to be probably feeling pretty crowded, and their exit strategy is profoundly predetermined. And it has nothing to do with you. That's created because they maybe had some needs met, but overall they felt neglected in some emotional capacity. And the other one I didn't emphasize a lot is maybe this combination of the two, a disorganized attachment or maybe dismissive. It's that fearfulness. It's going to bring together all these parts in a way, in the worst way, basically, because not only are they going to be afraid of intimacy and commitment, but they don't trust that, and they're going to lash out to anyone who gets too close to them. This is where you might see some of that anger. This is where you might see a lot of conflict. They probably spend a lot of time alone, and they're miserable. They're going to be more tendency to be on the abusive side. So while you're trying to navigate through all that information, is there maybe a simple way to know? Like, how can I decipher the attachment style of what I'm dealing with in dating? How am I going to know where I'm headed, and what does that path look like? Some of the ideas really boil down to asking the question, or at least figuring out the answer to a few. Does this person seek closeness, or do they not? When they're having a conversation, can they be vulnerable? Or do they shy away from that in the beginning of dating? And certainly before you're going to have sex with someone, you want to be able to express feelings, right? I mean, if you can't talk about sex, why are you having sex? A litmus test, basically. Or whether someone has the capacity to meet your needs and their own needs and determine if they're going to listen to you and understand how to accommodate you, as well as honoring their own feelings simultaneously with their own needs. Whether they're going to be anxious and look at the relationship in a different way, or avoidant where they shut off and they're not feeling it, or they're going to pull away. So maybe an example might be helpful here. Like, let's create a scenario. If I'm going to pick a few couples and give you a snapshot of what that date might look like. So maybe we have Tina and Tom, and they're going to have an awesome date, a great dinner, and they're having fun, and they're connected, and there's some innuendo, maybe a heightened sense of an idea that this person could be the one. And they're going to maybe go home together. They could have some great sex, and they connect. They look at each other's eyes, they have a sense of tenderness, and they're paying attention to what the other person's emotions are, and they're responsive. And they both get satisfied sexually as well. They feel combined together. They think this was a great night. And they learned a lot about each other, and they felt a bond and some strengthening together. The next day they talk about when they're going to see each other again, and there's a sense of excitement, a sense of wanting it to happen sometime soon. And overall, it's just a positive experience. So let's go to a different couple, maybe Tiffany and Sarah. They're on a date, they're having fun, they're having great sexual energy too, and they're really excited about being together. In fact, maybe most of their date is about sex. Their date's a lot of flirting. Their date's really obvious that what's going to happen next at the end of the night. They go home, they have sex, but it's more for function. There's not a lot of tenderness. It might have been performative, and it was good. I mean, everybody was sexually satisfied. There were orgasms, there was physical satisfaction. But Tiffany tells Sarah she's got to go. She can't spend the night. She don't want to cuddle. She's got to get up early in the morning. She doesn't sleep well with someone in her bed. And it's like the curtain just came down. And Sarah never hears from Tiffany again. Then maybe there's Jason and Mark. They have a great date, but Jason doesn't know if Mark likes him. And he's unsure about the entire night. They end up going back to Mark's place and they have sex, but Mark has the best experience he's ever had. And Jason pleases him a way he didn't think was possible. But the thing is, Jason didn't pay any attention to his own needs. He only wanted to make sure that Mark was happy and that Mark was satisfied. And he was performing to ensure that that was the night of success. They ended up dating for a while after that, but everything was all about Mark. Jason wanted to make sure that Mark was happy at all cost. And whatever Mark wanted, Mark got. Obviously, Jason never felt as though he was getting his needs met, and that relationship ended. And to this day, Mark isn't really sure what happened, and neither is Jason. The last example is going to be about Linda and Ron. This is your roller coaster date. They're both excited about the date, and they get there, it's going great, but then maybe Ron pulls away, or he's cold and distant all of a sudden, or maybe he's on his phone a bit. Then he starts paying attention to Linda again, and she thinks maybe she must have imagined it. Everything's going okay again. They're having a good time, and they end up going back to her place, and they have sex, and it's great. Ron actually takes the time to show her he's into her, and they talk, and they have conversation. But then he's out the door right away. She thinks he's never going to hear from him again, but the next day he calls and says he had a great time and wants to see her again. She felt a little awkward about it and confused, but decided to go out again. And then it's just a repeat. It's this push-pull dynamic, the roller coaster. The super I'm into you, and then I'm not into you at all. And that disorganized feeling is exactly what that is. So here's all these different scenarios and ideas how dates could show up different experiences with your different attachment style. The thing about it is, no matter what examples I give you, these people, these fictitious people, they're going to experience the same thing with different people on repeat over and over again until they figure it out, because we're the common denominator. So to recap, that's where we are. Anxious attachment's going to seek sex for approval. They're going to fall in love easily. They're probably not going to trust their partner. They're going to be constantly worried about their perception, how they're perceived, whether they're liked. They're going to have a big desire for proximity to their partner. They're going to want to spend a lot of time together. And it might be difficult to date them because there's going to be a sense of jealousy and territory and feeling misunderstood. There's going to be conflict. Sometimes those kind of sexual behaviors here are driven by an attempt to make up for a lack of love and insecurity they never felt. So that's why they fall in love quickly, because they want that and they need it. And they're worried about the relationship. So that anxious style is just a pursuit of connection, a pursuit of wanting what you needed, and sometimes even using it to manipulate and be strategic about getting your partner's attention and getting the nurturing that you so desperately craved. Now, avoidant attachment is different because they're not likely to fall in love as easily. They're going to be a bit more casual sex environment. They're going to take it slow. They're going to disconnect after, and they probably don't even believe in the sense of romance or happily ever after, maybe. It's going to be a less involved relationship overall. There might be a little bit of self-sabotage. A destructive nature could kick in, or they just want to have the emotions free because emotions are threatening and scary. It might be short-lived. They're just not going to be comfortable with vulnerability. You know, a lot of people don't enjoy sex that way because it's not a sense of passion. But they might think, let me get this over with. It's a mean to an end. Let me just have an orgasm. And sometimes sex is just to reduce stress. And that may be that case. But then disorganized is totally different. That feels unworthy of love. It's like that combination of avoidant and fearful and anxious all together. It's a fear of intimacy created with this unstable and unpredictable pattern, that roller coaster idea of exhibiting some extreme love, but then having it totally shut down and pulled away. There's a lack of worthiness here and a lack of low self-esteem here and being fearful of how they can even function in a romantic relationship at all. But the last one, the secure attachment, it's the unicorn. It's the long-term relationship with great sex. It's the one where we feel happy. It's just easy. You're vulnerable, they're vulnerable, you're committed, they're committed, and casual sex is really not even an interest for either one of you, because why would you want to have that without any connection? You'll also have a low level of anxiety, and your sense of worthiness and overall self-esteem is high, and you have a good, positive regard. So with all this plethora of information, I'm going to give you a cheat sheet. Here's going to be some characteristics that are indicative of each style, starting with anxious. Fall in love easily, maybe mistrust their partner, a little bit obsessive, maybe clingy, uses sex for love, maybe had more sexual partners earlier in life and in adolescence. They're going to exhibit more extreme sexual attractiveness, maybe, on purpose. They're going to be very jealous. They're going to have avoidance. Avoidance is going to have a discomfort with sex. They want emotionless type of sex, no vulnerability. They might be distant, and sex is used to create that distance too, to be in control. They're not going to really like giving foreplay maybe as much, and if they receive it, it might be just a physical act. There might be a lot of casual sex, and they might be fantasizing about somebody else. This type has a significant disposition for having affairs and being unfaithful as well. Then we've got disorganized. That's a little bit of a combination of these. It's a sense of extreme roller coaster. They're going to be passive in a relationship while having emotionless sex, and they don't feel worthy of love. But it's the same combination where it's a lot and then it's nothing. And the last one's secure. This is the one we're searching for. This is the one that's long-term. This is the one where we prefer closeness and emotional connection. And there's a high level of positive regard. They enjoy sex sexually as something for fun, and they're comfortable talking about and experiencing and doing it. They have overall less partners, and they enjoy the touching and the exploring and being with their partner with this sense of ease. These unconscious patterns of behavior are ingrained. But let's not forget they're not permanent. Doing some therapy, doing some emotional work to understand your behaviors and patterns are going to be able to free you of these constraints. You can address these intimacy issues and sexual concerns in a relationship to your whole attachment framework, inner child work, family of origin work, parts work. It's all connected. And these basic blueprints are of the past, and new ones can be formed simultaneously with healing. So I hope that makes sense. And I want you to know that somebody may not meet all this criteria. It may be one or two, and what I've said and sometimes might be extremes to try to illustrate a point. But the point of the matter is that once you figure out your attachment style, then you'll know what you're looking for in someone else. You'll know what level of improvement you need, and you'll be able to attract a healthy partner and a healthy relationship. So thanks for joining us, and I'll see you next time. Best and rest.